So this topic is, I feel, very, very important, but I don't think, get a lot of airtime. And that's around the experience of grief and loss in the journey of Parkinson's while your loved one is still with you. And so that's what we're going to be discussing today. We've heard, or you may have heard, the concept of ambiguous loss before. I know in the dementia Alzheimer's space, they reference it as the long goodbye. And so we're going to be kind of talking about that from the Parkinson's perspective today, and how this can be impacting you as a care partner and even your loved one. And we had mentioned before, this was part of a series, a survey that we framed the series around from Kyowa Kirin. And we pulled out this year, not some of the hard data as much as some of the comments, what we call their verbatim responses in the survey, which we then categorized to frame these programs. And some of them were, really quite profound, or will frame some of the discussion today. So I want to go ahead first, though, and introduce our speaker. And with us today is Eileen Joyce. She is a certified coach and grief recovery specialist. Her background includes 2 decades of experience of working with people dealing with devastating losses and changes resulting from death, divorce, serious illness, and I think she mentioned 40 other major losses. 40, like, that's a significant number. She has worked in hospice and palliative care as a volunteer. She has trained people to be at-home palliative care providers. So she has a vast knowledge of this and expertise. So I'm very excited to have Eileen with us. And then before I kick kind of this conversation off with Eileen today, and I will let you know, this is a conversation style program today. There aren't going to be any slides. It is recorded, but we don't have any slides. We really want this to be a discussion. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that. And Kelly did drop the links in here to our last 2 in this series in case that you missed it. But today we're going to start off with a couple of quotes from this survey we did back in 22 with Kyowa Kirin to kind of kick us off. So the first one was a statement that says, "It's been very hard watching this disease progress. It hurts to watch the decline." And the other one was, "The slow disintegration of my mother's mental and physical abilities, as well as the realization that she sometimes has of her disintegration, was the pain point." So Eileen, first of all, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to share your expertise with us. But I wondered if you could kick us off by describing really what ambiguous loss is and why we call it that.
Okay, well, thank you. And hello, everybody. Hello. So, first of all, grief, simply stated, is the normal, natural reaction to losses of any kind. And, I hate this. I'm seeing me instead of all of you.
I spotlighted you so everybody could not have to try to search for you in the vast boxes.
Oh, no, I don't want to look at me. I want to look at everybody. I'm having a little grief right now after the... Okay. Really? Can I change that?
Well, you know what? How about if you and I are side by side? It's when we have the gallery view and there's right now, and there'll be more, 77 people on, it's sometimes hard for people to find you in the boxes. So I just try to make it a little more simple. Kelly, if you could spotlight both of us, then it might make it a little simpler.
Hey, and it's fine because I changed it so I can see all. Okay.
And you can also change your view, I believe. Thank you, Judith.
I just did that. Okay. Hey,
Awesome.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, we were talking about grief. So it's simply the normal response that we have to any major loss, right? That's what grief is. Oftentimes when we hear that word grief, what do we automatically think of? Death, divorce. Like, the most devastating of changes in our life. Ambiguous, right? The very word means it's unclear. So it's like when we're with your loving partner, spouse, the physical changes, right? You can see those physical changes. When somebody has a broken arm, we know to open the door, to move out of the way, to help them, right? But the ambiguous losses is all this stuff that goes on in our head, up here, in our heart. So it's all of these emotions that we don't think of as grief. And yet grief is all the emotions. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as we go along. But I think that's the simplest way of thinking of ambiguous loss are the losses that we don't see with our eyes. All the losses that go on that aren't obvious, right? Think about the roles in your life together. Now you may be doing 50% of all of the daily tasks, and then soon as you know it, oh my gosh, now I'm doing all the bills, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Does it ever stop? When do we ever just get to be spouses? When do we just get to be, loving people that have fun together? All of that's a part of the loss. That's why it's so complex.
Absolutely. And so, and it's complex in different layers. So there's the emotional experience of maybe rule changes and loss of, even some independence, like not being able to just go and do things like you used to, that freedom. The changes in the relationship dynamic, the person you love is maybe not responding the same way. That level of emotional intimacy changes. So there's those kind of losses that are, definitely experiential more than something tangible. And then there's the tangible losses. So there's those kind too, right? That, we're seeing that, like that person was seeing that disintegration of physical abilities, maybe emotional abilities or cognitive abilities that are really hard. And for many, it is all of those things that they're experiencing. But like you said, it's not always a tangible thing. And you were talking about the losses that we typically think of in grief, and that's like a divorce and a death. And those are a little more defined. And they have maybe some customs and rituals that are attached to those that help people to process. When you don't have those experiences, how do people work through dealing with these little daily losses or big daily losses?
Right. Well, and also just one more thing about so when we have a friend whose person has died, say, we kind of know how to support them, right? Because we've all had the death of a loved one. But not everybody has had the experience of taking care of someone who now has very life-limiting stuff going on, right? So it becomes that, how do I take care of myself when all of my energy is going over there? And if that doesn't bring up a little resentment and a little anger and a little exhaustion, we're not talking about that, we're suppressing it, and it just gets worse and worse. So, one of the things about that, every one of us must be in some kind of support system where you can talk about it. Because after a while, you can't keep talking to the same friends or the same family member, right? after a while, they don't want to hear it. They don't know what to say to you. And people think that they have to give you some solution, some advice. And boy, that's the last thing most of us want to hear, isn't it? We want to be heard. We need to be heard. And that's why you go to support groups. You got to get this stuff outside of your head, because otherwise you go nuts, right? Anybody in here ever thinking like they're going nuts just from the plain
Oh,
exhaustion
I
of
see
it
some
all?
hands raising.
Hello?
Yes. Eileen, attached to this, and someone was hoping that you could address anticipatory loss
Yeah.
and grief and how that might be similar or different than even the ambiguous experience.
So all these kind of big words.
Buzzwords, all these buzzwords.
Yeah. So when we're watching our loved one with really any kind of chronic illness, but Parkinson's, you see so much of it, but then all that unseen stuff that's going on up here in the brain, and you start really getting that, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to handle. I'm handling this part, but I'm thinking ahead. He's going to die. She's going to die before me. I don't want that. And everybody in this room, I'm looking around, and most of us are a little bit old enough to know that you've already gone through how many deaths of loved ones, and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to be? But anticipating a more devastating loss, that doesn't help, does it? There's nowhere to go with that. Instead, we have to bring ourselves back. So fear really is what anticipatory grief is, right? It's fear. It's fear of the unknown, what's coming up. And our mind wants to know. I know, Nissa, you're going to be talking about like closure and all. See, another big word okay, the closure is about, I want to understand. The mind wants to know. And when we're in not knowing, wow, that is its own overwhelming state. What do I do about that? Once again, I have to be able to say this to somebody who can hear it and just listen to what I'm going through. Listening is the most important aspect in either helping yourself or a loved one. Your loved one also needs to be able to speak honestly about what they're going through, and maybe not to you, because they don't want you to be more upset, right? So they need somebody too that's separate from what you're going through. I don't know. Did that answer that question on
I think it did
these
very
words?
well. And I want to share a comment that has already come in. Janet from Maryland, she said, I suddenly couldn't stop crying this morning about my husband gradually slipping away from me. So that's exactly what we're discussing. We've been married for 49 years and I'm losing him. I don't mind the physical caretaking, but trying to help him understand mental tasks is breaking my heart. And who do I confide in when he's my best friend and confidant? I can't say to him, it frightened me when you couldn't figure out how to move your man on the game board while we were playing with the grandchildren. I want these changes to stop.
And you're describing like the most devastating thing is watching our loved one going through this and not being able to change it, and how do you be with watching a loved one suffer and go downhill is just the hardest work we ever do. And that's on top of the physical stuff. Like you said, Janet, it's like the physical stuff, I can do that. That's easy. How do I deal with this pain of what I know is coming and what I see in front of my face? Just the hardest stuff.
And I appreciate, people sharing. I even appreciate the emotion that I hear in your voice, because it normalizes what people are feeling, and it's a permission to allow yourself to feel. I think many people try to stuff it and hide it because they don't have time to deal with it, or it's too painful, too messy. Like you said, people, get tired of, if they try to talk about it, people can't fix it because there's not a closure to it. So like nobody can just fix it and box it up neatly and make it go away. So it sort of hangs out there all the time. And you might be okay right now, but then something happens or triggers, or you just out of nowhere feel a rush of emotion and grief, as we just heard, and kind of want to sit in that a minute. So it's important to process things or identify, and they can change daily. So if you signed up for this in enough time to get an email beforehand, you should have gotten a worksheet. And if not, you're going to get it at the end of today's program. And I am just going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is what we call untangling the web of ambiguous loss. And hold on, it looks like this. Can you see my screen okay? All right. And I know we want to spend a little bit of time on here, and I'm going to just leave this up for just a second so you guys can see it. We didn't expect for you to fill this out, but I would really recommend, if you have a printer, print numerous copies of this and do it regularly and see how much it changes. But we wanted you an opportunity to kind of look at some of the emotions that you might experience. They are not exhaustive. There are some blank spaces you can add your own. But even today, as you're thinking through this, if you've printed it, maybe even fill in or circle those emotions you feel you relate to. Because you might feel angry one day and just numb another day, but we want you to be able to, because sometimes attaching some identification to those feelings can help you. Naming them can be helpful. Don't you think so, Eileen? That sometimes naming some of these emotions can kind of help you talk through what it is. But then also it's important for you to be able to identify some things that you might be able to say you need from other people. A lot of people say they want to hear you out or help you, but they don't know how. And sometimes we don't even know what we need. So maybe spending some time identifying what you need from others, things that you can do for yourself to care for yourself. And I'm not talking about a spa day. I'm talking about, what do you need right now? Is it a good cry? Is it to take 5 minutes and go outside and just breathe some fresh air? Whatever it is, what is it, the things that you need for yourself? Or maybe it's something like, I need to give myself opportunity to process these feelings if I'm not really doing that. And then things that you can say to yourself. What are some things that you can say, affirmations or things that you want to tell yourself as you're going through that? So we intended for this to be sort of something that you do ongoing, because this is an ongoing thing. So I'm going to stop sharing because I want to get back to the discussion around this. So can you talk about some of these things, some of these emotions, some of these things that can impact the grieving process, some of these feelings that were up on that web, like helplessness, or you mentioned fear, some of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I like having. I have a chart that says grief, work, emotions. And really, grief, work, emotions are anything you may feel at any one moment. The problem is, most of us, if somebody says, well, how are you feeling today? It's like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. So it's kind of nice to have, oh, actually, I'm feeling pretty confused right now. But then the minute I say that, no, I'm really feeling angry right now because I'm doing so much and I'm so tired. But then I'm just really so sad. And right, I mean, that's how the emotional body is. It's not one emotion at any one time. It's like a whole swirl of things. That's why it's overwhelming. um, we have a thought like, okay, uh, we have to go to 3 doctors today. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And then emotionally, we have and I'm so afraid. I don't want to hear that one. I don't want to hear what that guy says. I don't want to hear what that other doctor says. What are we going to do with that? What about all these medications? Who the heck can keep all this straight? How do we get this done? How do we get this done? I love what you have on here, and this with these, like the boxes. We need structures, right? What I need from others. I don't know about any of you in the room, but I think one of my limitations, I'm not so good at saying, I need you to do this, right? I know how to get everything done. I'm a doer, right? We can get things done, but how good are you at asking for what you need? Well, for me to be able to ask for what I need, I have to know what I need. When do I ever think of that? Oh yeah, I think of it at 2 a.m. Nobody's around to ask, right? So this is really good. What I need from others, so that when the neighbor comes over and says, Dee, what can I do for you today? Instead of saying, oh gosh, I got it handled, maybe you can say, wow, would you mind coming in and hanging the laundry? No, nobody hangs laundry. So things I can do to care for myself. Wow, that's a really tough one. I mean, just think about that right now. Things I can do to care for myself. I can eat. I haven't eaten yet today. I'm going to eat when I get off of this Zoom. We have to eat. We have to take breaks. I
Drink
mean,
water.
right?
A lot of people don't even think of the basic drinking some water.
Water. Yes, the most. I can take a walk around the block. It takes 4 minutes. How often do I do that? Oh, yeah. Things I want to say to myself. Now, this is one of the most important things, okay? And talk about, what was that first word? Ambiguous, right? We're not conscious a lot of the time about what we're thinking about. And that can be the most limiting for a day. If you wake up and, most days you wake up and you're pretty tired already, right? You can just hear yourself saying, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, I'm so tired. My back hurt. Oh, I'm so tired. If you can get conscious of that and say, okay, I'm going to just take 5 minutes and rest for a moment. And then I'm going to say, today, I'm going to take care of me, even as I'm doing everything I need to do. And what that means for me today is, yes, I'm going to have a water bottle with me and a snack. And yes, I'm going to take 5-minute breaks in between things. And I can do that. We have to recognize our limitations. I bet everybody in this room is fully aware of what all they can do, right? But what are your limitations? My limitation is I need a break between each client. I take that And then when the next person comes in, I can be fully present. That's what we want to be for our loved ones. You want to be fully present. And if you're up here in your head, you are not fully present. How do you get there? Again, support, having other people that listening to other people that are going through this stuff. I mean, that's why you go to support groups, right? Because, oh, I'm not alone. I mean, my situation is unique because nobody else has this situation. But there's so many similarities, aren't there? When you're caring for a partner who needs way more than what they can give back at this point.
And that's the hard one, because it is definitely not equal, and that is painful. And one of the things that I feel a lot of us probably could write down is, things to say to myself or to do for myself, and is to show more self-compassion, because I know when I get, overwhelmed and stressed out, I don't really have a lot of compassion for myself. I've exhausted that with my, with my situation or with my loved one or whatever. So then I end up taking the brunt of it, honestly. I wanted to go back to some of these comments because I know they're going where we were planning to go, and they're really important. And that's talking about guilt. This person said, this one's a big one. I love my husband more than anything, but I also love my job, which occupies about 30 hours a week from home. If I quit, I feel I'll lose myself in grief and despair. Work is one of the ways I care for myself so that I can at least be somewhat upbeat with him, but I feel guilty. And I'm sure there's a lot of other examples of guilt in this group. So can we talk about guilt? Because that's a big one.
Absolutely. So the first thing we're going to do is, the very definition of guilt is doing something with the intention to harm. Think about that a minute. Guilt is about doing something with the intention to harm. Now, are you guilty about anything, really, with your caring and loving of your loved one? So when you hear the thought, because guilt is in thinking, okay, it's not an emotion. The emotion under guilt can be, I'm ashamed of that. I really want to go out and work and get away from him for a bit. That's really what you're feeling, right? That's when you got to have a conversation with yourself. Say it out loud. Am I going to work and I have the intention of harming him? Well, yeah, but if I'm not there, he needs me and he might be blah. So you got to talk about that. You got to talk about that with each other.
Absolutely. And, if you're not attending a support group, or there isn't one, I mean, there's certainly online options, but even seeing a counselor, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't really feel like that's necessary, but honestly, sometimes that can be some of the best investment in your own well-being is, being able to unpack some of these things that you're feeling somewhere that, with someone who's not emotionally involved, it can give you, neutral feedback and help you really delve into some of these things that you're feeling. Because sometimes, like you said, guilt isn't really that you've done anything wrong. It's shame, it's frustration, it's despair, it's all of those different things kind of coming out as guilt because you feel those things. You feel bad that you feel those things, which are actually normal ways of your brain processing all of the stuff that's going on around you that's really quite painful and deserving of its space to express. I want to, I know we talked, we kind of started to talk about the closure and how the brain, why we want it. And I think you touched on, the brain craves it. Why is our brain craving closure so much? And that's why we are trying to constantly find a way to categorize or box it up or whatever. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So closure is we want to understand, right? Like think of a breakup with a friend or someone, or a divorce, and it's like, well, we didn't have any closure. What that's really expressing is that, I don't really get it. I don't understand what happened, because the brain, as you're saying, and the brain wants to understand. We want to know. And it's like, well, and until I understand it, I can't get to accepting what has happened. That's in thinking. And the fact is, advanced chronic illness, it's not like there is any closure there. And it's like, well, then death, is that a closure? Death is the end of something. That's like the end of a relationship. But I don't quite understand what happened. Just even in hearing how I'm talking about this, it's like, right, there's an emotional component there. And emotions don't have to be explained. So it's confusing for the mind, for sure. And it's also very confusing for our heart, because one thing, like, I'm so sad, and yet there are moments where I feel happy. And the truth is, the heart holds all of that. But our mind has this thing of it has to be either this or this. If I'm angry, I can't be loving. That's just not true, is it?
Oh, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I've heard that before. Like, well, if you feel frustration or you feel, sadness or despair or even woe, like woe is such a word. That doesn't mean you can't also experience moments of joy, something that makes you laugh, or, it's not only one
Not
sided.
linear.
Right. That's the word I was looking for. It's not linear at all. And so that's important also in people understanding that you can feel all of those emotions even within minutes or seconds of each other, and that's okay.
It just is.
Yeah, exactly.
It just is. See, I think that we're all used to like being made wrong for feeling something. Well, the truth is, feeling it's just there. And one of the things about emotions is, remember, emotions are energy in motion, like physiologically. I'm not talking airy-fairy. And so one emotion, if we can sit with how bad, just sit how bad you feel, that emotion will change. Something happens and all of a sudden, oh, wow, wait a minute, I got to make some food. Oh, yeah, we enjoy having a meal together. Like it just kind of moves along, right? But when we try to suppress whatever feeling comes up, it kind of just grows. It doesn't get handled because it doesn't move. Emotion wants to be heard. It wants to be heard. So we have to stop and hear it.
Yeah. And, you're talking about acceptance versus maybe closure, and and now how hard that is. And one of the quotes that came from the survey was literally that it's just very hard to accept. And it
Yeah.
is, and it's an ongoing thing. And one day you might feel like, okay, I've got this, I feel like I'm at that point of acceptance, and then something happens and you get this wave that hits you, and you're like, okay, maybe not, and today I'm feeling very much the opposite of that. And I think that's what's hard for our brain sometimes, because we can't just categorize it easily.
And it's hard, like you said, it's hard to get to acceptance. How do we get there? Well, so between what is happening and acceptance are all those things you wish had been different, better, more or less. How do we get to really dealing with the resentments and the regrets, the I wishes? That comes down to getting to forgiveness. I got to forgive myself for yesterday. I was really not that nice. I have to forgive myself and have compassion, which you mentioned before, right? A lot of times it's way easier to have compassion and forgiveness for the other person, but for ourselves, it's tougher to get to. And forgiveness is not about condoning the action, okay? It's not about condoning it. It's like, I wish I hadn't said that. And I need to forgive myself, even though I wish I hadn't said that. I'm going to be better tomorrow. I'm going to be better tonight. So forgiveness is the action of saying, I forgive myself. I need to say it out loud, because forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's an action. I forgive. Okay.
So important.
Yeah.
One of the things that we we've mentioned is the importance of support. But what would you say, or how would you have people handle situations where family members and others that are supposed to be supportive are showing less than support? One person saying, one of my adult children wants me to put my husband first in everything and my needs don't matter. And I've heard that before, like, when a care partner does sort of set some boundaries of what they can do, and it's good to set boundaries, but then they get pushback from other family members of, well, you're just being selfish, or mom or dad is the one that's dealing with this, you should be focused on them. How do people navigate when either they have loved ones that's unsupportive, or people just don't respond to them? They're not giving them the support they need. Even if they say, what I need from you is not to try to fix the situation, I just need you to hear me, and I just need to feel your love in your presence, and they don't get that. So how do we navigate those things?
Yeah. Family systems, you're bringing up some of the most challenging things on top of what you're going through every day. And the truth is that some people in the family are doers, and they're going to say things that have you feel wrong about what you're doing. And that's where we got to just let go. And it's like, what somebody says more about them than you. That's really important for you to think, right? And what somebody says about me is really none of my business. And I hear it coming from them. I might look at, that's an idea. And then when I hang up from them, I ain't doing it that way. So it's like, again, the more we can be in a healthy state for ourselves. That's where that self-care thing is about self-discipline. That's why we don't do self-care, by the way. It's a lot more stuff to do to make a salad than to pop something, macaroni and cheese that feels all good. But what we really need is that grounding of protein and salad. The more we can take care of ourselves, the better we are in caring for everybody else. And that includes hearing from the family. When Susie says, you ought to be doing this, you should be doing that. Hey, thanks for sharing. Maybe I'll try it. That's really hard to be how I just said it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's really hard to say. If you're overwhelmed, depleted, grief-stricken, and really afraid. So we have to, the more you take care of yourself, the more able you are to be with all the challenges of the everyday.
And I like some of the suggestions, and I kind of agree. Like, if your family member doesn't agree with the way you're handling things, invite them to come and spend some time with them so they can kind of see the experience of caring for someone, and then maybe they'll have a different insight into that, because a lot of them are coming from maybe limited information on what's going on. Just like, when we hear the story, when people go to the doctor, they put on a good show, and someone said, oh, they can put on a good show for a couple of days when we're with others, but what the care partners are seeing the 24/7 is a different scenario. So people have limited information that they're basing some of their ideas on. So
yeah.
Another thing that is, I've been watching, the comments in here, and this is again part of that, just that ongoing grief, and is, dealing with looking back, reflecting through, reminiscing through pictures or remember when, and sometimes that can be really beneficial, especially if your loved one is maybe experiencing some cognitive changes, but that can be a real painful experience. And I love how another person said there are two Bobs, the Bob one from before and now Bob two. And now you're getting used to a new person you're married to or partnered with, a new person than who you were with. And you look back at these pictures and that stirs up. So what do you say? How do people deal with that too? Because you don't want to not, look back at memories, but if they're really painful, how do we deal with that? I mean, we can just even look up on the wall and see even photos from a year or so ago when they were different and able to do more. That hurts.
Yeah. And sometimes because something hurts doesn't mean I should shy away from it. At the beginning, when we were talking, it's like crying together feels like something, oh, I don't want, but that's what's there. That is the truth of what's sitting there. And to look at pictures and have a cry about that wonderful memory, it also, again, that sadness can change to, oh my God, and remember how funny it was when so-and-so came in. So I think we're all afraid of that sadness, and I don't want to cry in front of him. And yet, sometimes you miss that opportunity because in the illness, it can get to a place where any kind of strong emotion will actually put the person into a coughing spell or whatever. And then it's too late to go into these sad memories that also have happiness to them. So my answer there again is like, if it's really sad, go there. It's okay. it's the truth. It's really sad.
And it's also opportunity to express and process those
Yeah.
feelings. Like, we said, go to that web of ambiguous loss, pick your emotion for the day, feel it. Like a lot of us like to run away from those feelings because they aren't comfortable,
Right.
honestly. But in order to process them, to get to a level of some acceptance, you kind of have to lean into them and feel them,
Absolutely.
aside from maybe talking through them or, even going to counseling. Are there other ways? And I'm going to just say sidebar to counseling, because I've heard this so many times before and I completely understand that. If a counselor doesn't understand the experience of Parkinson's, they may not really fully understand the experiences of the care partner. So, yes, there's people that are versed in grief and there's people that know how to manage depression or anxiety, but there is a level of difference maybe with the experience of Parkinson's, that some of their suggestions might not be as appropriate or as helpful if they don't understand that experience. But it is still a good outlet if you can find someone you're comfortable with. But outside of that, what are some other ways that people can maybe go through some of these emotions to release them?
Yeah. So, I say the antidote for grieving is the serenity prayer. And again, using the handout as an example, like columns, right? What can I change? What can't I change? And then I pray for the wisdom to know the difference. But writing things down, very important. And I'm not talking about journaling, right? I'm just talking about right now, I don't feel anything, and write that. Like, just get it out, get it out. Otherwise, we're holding it in and suppressing it. Suppressing emotions takes a great deal of energy from your body. So the more we can get it out, if there's nobody to talk to, write it. In the middle of the night, if you're awake, just gobbledygook. And then all of a sudden something comes through for you. Believe me, I don't say anything that I don't do on a constant basis myself, because I hear the stories every single day. And I also live with my own family and losses and stuff. We have to be able to get it out. I think everybody in here understands that. And yet we don't know how to, but we do. We do know how. Even if it's, I go into the car, I drive away a little bit and turn on music and blast it and scream it out. I come home with a very sore throat, but boy, do I feel free. It's like we got to free ourselves up of all this. This is heavy, heavy lifting every day. And it feels burdensome because it is. So somehow we got to let it off, let it out. Okay. How do we find joy? How do we find hope? Right? When things look so hopeless, how do I have hopelessness and yet find the energy to do everything and to smile while I'm doing it? I can only do it by letting go of all the load. I mean, there's certain things you just have to do, right? But if you keep thinking, oh, this is so hard, this is so terrible, I hate it, I hate my life, I just went out, why did I leave him 10 years ago? And then bring myself back into, because I love him, because I made that commitment. and I'm going to stay here, and by God, I'm going to find some joy. How do I be happy? Happiness is a choice. If you're waiting for a feeling to come through of happiness, forget about it. It's like, I have to say out loud, you know, I really am happy. May I be happy today. May I be filled with loving compassion. And may he be filled with loving compassion, because I need it. Oh, sorry, I said he, she, all of us.
All of us, that's right. And that kind of goes along with the worksheet of what would I like to say to myself.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, those are the kind of things you can work on, especially if that's something you struggle with. I mean, some people are very optimistic and joyful by nature, and it might be a little easier, but some of us that might be wired less, so it might be challenging. It might be the very practice that you need to put into place to kind of help you mentally process this. And you were talking about like all of the things that people are doing, and all of these emotions are really heavy. And I want to make sure we do touch on like the exhaustion and the fatigue that care partners feel physically from lack of sleep, from doing so many tasks. I mean, it's an emotional, it's a physical, mental type of exhaustion. And then not processing feelings. I would say it's probably more exhausting to not release than to release. Would you agree with that? Because I know sometimes releasing emotions can be very exhausting, but you feel like it can help with some of that mental or emotional exhaustion that not going to help with lack of sleep, but some of those other forms of exhaustion.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It is true that, you know, after a good cry, sometimes what you feel is this almost energylessness, which may be exactly what you need to just go lay down. And I think some of us, boy, naps are not something I ever have been into. And yet I've grown to understand that I could lay down for 5 minutes and that will be enough for that moment. So it's not like I need a whole bunch of time to take a break. Sometimes it's just that 5 minutes. Sometimes it's just that walking outside and being in the air is helpful. I mean, we have to think about the easy little things that can help us. Sometimes when we're going really through tough times, my daughter comes in here and shows me these silly things that she finds online. And so you have a laugh. I mean, how great is that? How often have you laughed over the last 2 days, right? When you think about it. Turn on a funny movie instead of the news. You know, that was something that I thought of last night, was that one thing I could ask for is, hey, I want to watch this TV series, not that one you like. Can you give that to me this week? Right? So we can ask the other person for something that maybe they can't do a lot right now, but they can give in to that. That's kind of easy and fun. So easy and light, because everything's so heavy right now, right, for you? And don't turn on the news, but sometimes, see, we want to turn on the news to get outside of our own life and think about, oh my God, those people over there, thank God I live here. You know, so then that brings in gratitude, like going to bed with the things I'm thankful for, because a lot of the days it's hard to thank, you know, it's hard to be grateful for things because it was so hard today. So the whole thinking of what you're thankful for is great. And like acknowledging the other person, finding something to acknowledge, and then also acknowledge yourself. Okay, part of acceptance is acknowledging what is hard and how I got through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving credit when you have gotten through a rough day and you made it. So
Yeah.
I don't think we give ourselves credit near enough for the things that we've done each day. And that's a part of joy building too. Like, I actually have done many hard things and I'm still standing and I'm really strong. Sometimes we don't want to admit that we're resilient and strong because we don't want to be going through this to begin with. But the fact is, you have the capacity to do more than you think, and allowing yourself the credit that you deserve is important part of that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, absolutely. And asking for that acknowledgement, sometimes, I just said it to Jeff the other day, I really need you to thank me for the other day. Because you normally do, but you didn't. So I know you were busy, but it's like, that was a big deal for me to ask for that. Don't really have a lot of strength in that, asking somebody, especially when you're caregiving 24/7. It's really hard to kind of step out of that and remember, you're a person with needs. You're human. And if you act like the savior, it's just not the truth. We can't save another person. We have to save ourselves. We can do whatever needs to be done, but it's not about saving. It's not about, you can't really change the disease. Somehow we got to work with it and work with each other. How do you work with each other when it's so imbalanced at different times? It's really tough.
Absolutely.
It just is.
Well, we are about out of time, but Eileen, this has been an incredible conversation. I know people were asking if you had any type of reading list that you could recommend. If you do, you could send it to me and we can email it out to everyone that's attended. If there's some books out there that you can recommend that is helpful, we'll send those. I know Kelly dropped the Real Talk Care Partner online group that we have twice a month. So it's facilitated by Eden. She's a clinical social worker. I'm a clinical social worker. Sometimes I fill in a pinch, but we certainly welcome you to join those anytime you want. And many communities have Parkinson Care Partner support groups. There's lots of online ones. So we encourage you, if you're not involved in one, to get involved in one. They're very beneficial. But I mean, if you do have any great reads, recommendations, let me know and I'll make sure those get sent to everybody. But I do want to just thank you so much for sharing this. I know this is a hard topic, but it's such an important topic, and I hope everyone will use that ambiguous loss sheet. I actually have used it. I filled it out one day and I'm like, wow, this is actually a really helpful practice. And to go back and do it, because you do change day by day, week by week. And, you'd be sometimes surprised by the emotions that you're actually feeling at any given time. So thank you so much, Eileen.
Yeah, you're so welcome. It's just, it's an honor to be talking about all this stuff. This is hard living and grieving kind of work that everybody here is involved in.
And we have a tradition at PMD Alliance that I'm going to invite everybody. Instead of the wave, we did this the other day. I said, instead of the wave, let's give you the heart, because this really hit the heart today. This was beautiful. So thank you so
Like
much.
everybody else.
Thank you. And I want to thank again to Kiowa Karen for providing us this information for the survey. It's such a wealth of information. And again, if you didn't get the handout, we will email it to you following today's program. So thank you very much, everyone.
And Anissa, I actually have a handout that I did for a Parkinson's group that I did. And it's kind of a nice information of, grief and loss and hope and resilience. So
If you send it, we'll send it out to everybody.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.